I am the last god in this world. I normally have no hobbies, I just like to listen to people everywhere make wishes, of course, whether I agree or not depends on my mood. Because human wishes are like 1,000 words, they are really boring, so I haven't used my magic power for a long time. Until that girl appeared in front of me. She told me her wish, that she wanted to travel to ancient times, to become a beauty queen. Beauty queen? When I heard this wish, I immediately got up from the clouds. Needless to say, I have been a god for so many years, I have never seen such a strange wish. It is really more terrifying than someone telling me that they want to change their life to be a beggar. Out of a desire to have fun, I agreed to her request. Come on, I should still admit that I wanted to watch a play, so I agreed. No matter how you put it, when I appeared in front of her, we were both excited. I was excited because she was so beautiful, a good seed to be a beauty queen. After I fulfilled her wish, there would be a good show to watch. She was excited because she met a living fairy, her wish was about to come true, traveling through time and space, living freely and carefree. What a joy! On the way to take her through time and space, I asked her why she made such a wish. As a result, she was so happy that she wanted to jump up and down. Her voice also changed. She said that a beauty queen lives in silk and brocade, has thousands and thousands of servants admiring her, is surrounded by crowds. How many people wish for it but cannot get it? Wait until I earn enough money, stop doing this job, reform, and can still have fun with my best friends, sing and earn clean money, stay away from human traffickers, ordinary people. How carefree! She excitedly said to me. If only I could meet another quick-witted young master. When she said these words to me, her eyes lit up, causing me to not dare to say anything even though I had a few words to say, afraid that after burning away her enthusiasm, I would have nothing to joke about, so I quickly said to her, okay, I will help you do it. This young lady is truly capable. When something comes up, she doesn't hesitate at all. Arriving at the Jinyu brothel in the capital, the first thing she did was to hold a pipa and run to the madam, nominating herself as the beauty queen. The madam was stunned, circling her 5 or 7 times, and after confirming that she wasn't joking, she immediately agreed. After ordering someone to take her to bathe and groom herself, the madam looked at her back and slapped herself. Is the god of wealth blind today? Thank you, although I'm not the god of wealth, I've still been offended. Signing the document to sell my body to an official slave, the madam gave her a room, saying that she would invite someone to teach her how to serve customers. As a result, she immediately refused, saying 5 words, selling her art, not her body. The madam is not as easy to talk to as me. She turned around and threw her into a dark room. She didn't forget to curse, you scheming bitch. She was locked in a dark room for days, calling me for that many days. But I didn't show up. Haven't we had enough of playing yet? The game had just started and it wanted to stop. The movie had just started and it had already revealed everything. The teacher wanted to go to the bathroom while giving a lecture. This wasn't fun at all. Anyway, by the end, she was exhausted, lying face down on the ground without moving. Only then did she stop calling me, stop scolding me. What a coincidence, the madam came at this time. She asked the young lady if she had thought it through. The young lady regained her strength. She said she came to be a beauty queen, wanting to rely on her pipa skills to earn a decent living, not to sell her body. Immediately after that were some confusing words about becoming a pure beauty queen, a noble singer, and maintaining her moral character. Making the madam laugh, she turned to say one word to the people on both sides, beat. The young lady was beaten to death. I almost couldn't bear to watch anymore. I could only close my eyes and tilt my head to gnaw on my apple. It's not that I didn't show my care to help her, it's mainly her own choice of fate. If I disturb her halfway, in the end I will be the one who will be backfired. There's no need for me to risk my life for the wish of a mortal. When the young lady was gasping for breath, the madam ordered me to stop. She advised the young lady not to waste this beautiful face, without this face, who would come to listen to her pipa? How many good musicians in the capital are there? How many people would really throw money away like trash for the sound of the pipa? It's like a salt boat capsizing in a ditch. Whether the young lady agrees or not is not important. What is important is that the madam, seeing her beautiful face, cannot bear to actually do it. She just dragged her out of the dark room and threw her into the backyard to recuperate, and told the person taking care of her that when the young lady has come to her senses and agrees to receive guests, then she can eat and drink good food. The young lady could not bear it, calling me day and night. Don't say I am a god, even if I were a ghost, I could not bear being summoned like this. There was no other way, I could only appear. The young lady wanted me to open my golden hand for her, at least to help her live a little better. I said no, in my contract with her there was no such request. This kind of request that goes beyond the operating rules would consume a lot of magic power, and would require incense. But the young lady could not add it. The incense she could give me was already not much, especially with such an unreasonable request that went against the heavens. If she didn't build me 8 or 10 temples and gilded 8 or 10 statues, I wouldn't be able to use this magic power. Could it be that she had just made me fulfill her wish, sent her to a time and space where she could fulfill her wish, and then made me expend my magic power and break the rules of space and time for her, helping her live a life of a beauty with tens of thousands of servants, wearing silk and brocade, and at that time, I myself would have to expend my magic power because there was no incense to support me, and I would also suffer the consequences of being attacked by backlash and my soul would be scattered. It could be considered that she had won big, but there was no such good thing in this world. I am a god, not a place to harbor resentment. She angrily picked up a rock and threw it at me, but the rock just went straight through my body and fell to the ground behind me. Will you help or not? The girl cried loudly and pressed me. Before I could reply, the door to the dark room was opened. The young lady's noisy noise had alerted the guard outside. The madam thought that the young lady wanted to run away, so in a fit of anger she decided to throw her into the dungeon in the backyard of the Golden Jade Pavilion. What kind of people were in the dungeon? There were young people, old people, unmarried people, married people, poor people, rich people, crazy people, not crazy people, ragged clothes, neatly combed hair, screaming to get out, speechless people. It was chaotic, all of them were women. Throwing the young lady in was like a drop of water flowing into the ocean, a grain of sand falling into the desert. Not even a sound could be heard before she disappeared. If it weren't for the fact that I had signed a contract with her, body connected, soul connected, otherwise I really wouldn't know where she was. A kind woman told the young lady that there were only people here who refused to sell their bodies, and no one knew what the future would bring. As soon as the words fell, the cellar door was opened, and the servants of Jean Yuga rushed in, casually carrying a young lady out, as if pulling her hair and dragging her out, no different from killing a chicken. No one knew what she was about to experience, but a few people had already taken action. The young lady was about to leave, but was pulled back. Don't go, if you go, you'll be beaten to death. The woman beside her kindly reminded her. The young lady was dragged out screaming and struggling, countless black hands groped her body, some people wanted to help her, but soon suffered the same fate. Perhaps the young lady couldn't bear it anymore, she turned her head and bit hard on the hand that held her life, fiercely like a demon escaping from hell. Before everyone could react, she turned around and rushed into the ruined corner of the cellar wall. Fresh blood splattered, her forehead bone made a crisp sound. The young lady's limp body slid down. Screams of terror immediately echoed in the dungeon, followed by the frustrated cries of the errant servants, one after another. But it wasn't over yet. A drop of the dead girl's blood landed on the face of another woman who was cowering. She reached out to touch it, suddenly screaming in fear, screaming and screaming, then laughing, laughing and laughing, then screaming again. She kept shouting, "Blood, blood," then treating her blood-stained hand like a treasure and showing it to the others, scaring everyone into continuously cowering. But she seemed very happy, clapping her hands and singing like a jumping child, "Blood. See the color. A. Ha! 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 Someone's dead. Dead. Dead." She kept jumping, running outside the cell under everyone's astonished and bewildered gazes, coincidentally bumping into the madam who came in to see what was going on. The woman smiled foolishly at the madam criticized her and pushed her away, then asked what happened. With this situation, everyone fell silent. The madam lost her patience. After wasting money, she scolded the servants for just standing there. Didn't they know what to do? The servants glanced at each other, and grabbed the woman's hair with all their might. When the knife stabbed into her chest, she was still laughing foolishly. Seeing that in less than the time it took to burn incense, 2 people had died in front of her, and some people couldn't sit still. So a young lady couldn't hold it in any longer and came forward. She raised her voice in anger and scolded the madam and the servants, encouraging the women in the cell to fight back with her. But unfortunately, no one did anything. The madam who was preparing to leave the cell turned around in surprise. The words, "Are you okay?" were written all over her face. As expected, before the young lady could even rush in front of the madam, she was stopped by the cruel servants. She was about to raise her hand to beat her when the madam behind her sternly shouted to stop. She pointed at the servants and scolded, "This young lady's price, even if they sold several people, they still wouldn't be able to pay for it." She kicked the 2 corpses on the ground in disgust, telling the servants that today she had already lost money on both of them if this matter continued to lose more capital, but this servant chopped off each of their arms. No one would expect to live well. Then she looked around at the women in the dungeon, asking them, "What's so bad about being a prostitute?" And everyone resisted like that. Being able to eat delicious food, drink sweet drinks, wear gold clothes, wear silver jewelry, have a car when going out, have servants and attendants when entering the door, and if lucky, become a silver-haired beauty, surrounded by so many people, why wouldn't they be willing? Then her eyes fell on the young lady who had just protested, saying that she was useless and no longer useful, but she had spent a lot of money to buy her, so she had to leave her. She signaled the servants to come up, allowing them to taste the taste of that young lady. Those who have never tried the taste of a man, if they have tasted it, will they still resist like this? The madam said so. Slowly waving her round fan, she walked out surrounded by a crowd, not forgetting to instruct the servants who were about to taste the sweetness. "After play enough, don't forget to throw this girl to the lowest brothel, guard her, collect every penny from any man who comes, regardless of whether they are beggars, robbers or coachmen. As long as they can spend money, they will be served by her. If they can't make up for the money spent to buy her, then even if they only have one breath left, they can't stop." Then the lady asked me, "Why didn't you save those people?" But I just felt confused. The one who signed the contract with her was her. What did the others have to do with me? "But you are a god," she questioned me. Me? I am a god, that's right, but I am also a god created by people, so from the moment I was born, I was a god. They said I have lived for tens of thousands of years. I have lived for tens of thousands of years. I myself don't remember clearly anymore. They said, I am a god, so I was born different from humans. Humans and I are not the same species. I fulfill their wishes, just like they fulfill the wishes of kittens and puppies. If you die, you die. If you lose, you lose. If you die, you are no longer there. Then can't you create a new person? Anyway, death is good, or you can create a new one, as long as they offer incense to me. Then what's the difference between them? If there was no difference, then was there a need to react so strongly? I asked the young lady back, but she just rolled her eyes at me without saying a word. If she didn't say anything, then fine, I wouldn't be able to help anyway. After all, her wish was to transmigrate to become a beauty queen. I had brought her here. She only needed to take one step forward to achieve her wish. It's not like the food was already delivered to her mouth. And she still needed me to eat for her. Perhaps the consecutive deaths had caused her a great shock. In the end, after a few days of suffering, she chose to agree with the madam to receive guests. The madam immediately smiled, hugged the young lady and called her daughter, and told her that she didn't want to force her to sell herself. Didn't she hope she would meet a prince or noble, spend a night of spring, and wouldn't the rest of her life without worrying about food and clothing? Under the control of a group of servants, the young lady could not say anything. She could only let the madam order her around, then was pushed up to the stage to receive guests. Because the madam planned to cultivate her to be a beauty queen, of course she could not receive guests. According to the madam, the price of the good things sold on the sidewalk and the tables in the high-rise buildings must be different. Therefore, the first group of guests she received were a group of elegant scholars who had entered the capital to take the imperial examinations and handsome young masters. It was said that there were several famous figures in this year's imperial examinations inside. Their bets were on the golden boards scattered throughout the capital. However, it was a pity that this was a game of chess for the talented and the young lady. No matter how good her pipa playing was, it was still mediocre. So someone suggested playing the game of wine flowing down the river, beating the drums and passing flowers, and reciting poems in response. As soon as she finished speaking, the madam was overjoyed, and ordered someone to bring a pile of pens and ink, wanting these talented people to bestow ink on the wall of the golden jade pavilion, so that in the future they would pass the imperial examinations, which would be considered the glory of the golden jade pavilion. The talented people played happily, but the young lady did not know. When it was her turn, she was neither versed in the rules nor knew how to respond, stuttering for half a day without being able to say anything. With great difficulty she managed to squeeze out a poem she had memorized before, but was immediately ridiculed by the talented people. No matter what, we were having fun today. Why, when it was the young lady's turn, the rhythm was off, the rules were off, there was no response, there was no rhyme, the writing did not match the scene did not match the situation. The words were good, the sentences were beautiful, but 8 out of 10 were not written by the young lady herself. Now that she recited it, it really made people laugh sarcastically. The title of Beauty Queen. What a pipe dream! Speaking so directly that the young lady blushed, the madam also lost some face. Fortunately, among the talented people, there were still a few kind people, ordering the troublemakers to shut up, saying that today was just a game, there was no need to pay attention to these trivial details. After that, the few people who were drunk started chatting, erasing that brief awkward scene. But right after they left, the madam dragged the young lady back to the backyard. Continuously scolding the loser, continuously shouting and shouting shamefully. After shouting and shouting, her anger was still not satisfied. She ordered someone to tie the young lady to a pole, used a whip soaked in salt water to beat her until her cries for help became weaker and weaker. The madam was still not satisfied, continuously resenting that the young lady had smashed the signboard of the Golden Jade Pavilion today, afraid that in the future these talented people would become old officials, and would no longer come to this place. If someone hadn't come and said that the madam's beloved poodle suddenly refused to eat while she was beating her, and the madam loved dogs, how could she have let the young lady off so easily? Late at night, the young lady called me out again. She said I lied to her. This is not the path to becoming a beauty queen? Heaven and earth can testify. Which beauty queen hasn't gone through this? If she hadn't refused to sell herself to anger the madam, the current scene wouldn't have happened. Get lost. The young lady uttered those quintessence words. Then she wanted me to take her back. I said no, time is not up. If I take her back now, I will be hit by backlash. The young lady didn't listen. She insisted on me taking her away. The incoherent screaming was really too noisy and gave me a headache. It really can't be done. You should call the police. I had no choice. The rules of heaven and earth are like this: if you arbitrarily interfere or interrupt the process of fulfilling your wish, I will be hit by magic. Why don't you go and report it to the deity who operates the rules of heaven and earth? I didn't expect that the young lady would actually ask me how to find that immortal. However, those gods who shouted to save the world and save the people every day had long since disappeared since the Queen Mother was forced by Qianxiang and Langshan to change the laws of heaven. By the time immortals like us who have lived through countless generations appeared, there was nothing left of them. Saving the world and saving the people was not the responsibility of us immortals. To us, the living beings of the three worlds were just things that could be destroyed at will. The only purpose of us becoming immortals was to make love more convenient, then fly around everywhere to create more romance. Until later, the other gods, because of love, killed each other until they all died, leaving only me, the only single dog left in the world, becoming the only and final god in this world. Therefore, my superior was me. The young lady could have found me and accused me, then I would have interrogated myself. Unfortunately, she didn't do that, but instead picked up a rock from the ground and threw it at me. The rock passed through my body and fell behind. She couldn't hit me, because I would never let an entity appear in this world so easily. This made her even angrier, and she yelled in her almost lost voice, telling me that she wasn't the kind of foolish woman from the old era who only knew how to cling and wait for death. She was an independent woman from the new era, with a modern mindset that transcended her time, and a lot of modern scientific knowledge to support her. More importantly, she also had a political foundation formed from political textbooks at school. She wanted to prove to me that she could change everything in her own circumstances. Between you and me, there must be one crazy person. Saying she wants to do something, she dares to do it. After a night, she called the madam over, apologized to the madam, promised the madam that in the future she would not let such a thing happen again, that in the future she would definitely serve the guests well. After all, her dream was to be a beauty queen. The madam really let her please her. In the end, it was still because of her beautiful appearance. In a place like a brothel, being beautiful was equivalent to having people willing to pay money to the door. Who would throw money away for nothing? So the madam smiled and asked her, so she had thought it through? The young lady pursed her lips, smiled, why not? The madam was extremely happy, immediately arranged to organize a meeting, sent the young lady to serve the guests. The highest bidder would have the first night. I don't know if the madam discovered me or not, but I saw that the young lady's face was pale. She hurriedly told the madam that she was not yet proficient in the game of talking to the young masters. If she rushed out like that, she was afraid that she would lose face. It was fine if she lost face, but she couldn't ruin the reputation of the Golden Jade Pavilion, right? Therefore, she planned to ask the madam to bring someone to teach her how to communicate with these literati. She wanted to practice more. The madam thought for a while and then agreed. But practice is practice, wine still has to be drunk. If the young lady didn't have enough money to pay the teacher's tuition, then there was no need to wait to see if she practiced well or not. She would have to entertain guests right away. The young lady agreed, but as soon as she turned around, her face turned into a bitter gourd. She muttered and cursed me 1,000,000 times. I also felt that I was wronged. Didn't I have to fulfill her wish? In general, the young lady lived a peaceful life for the next few days, studying literature during the day and entertaining guests at night, working very hard. Gradually, the madam also lowered her guard, and with the young lady voluntarily wanting to become a beauty queen, the madam really thought that she had thought it through, to the point that the madam did not stop her when she said she wanted to go out and pick out some clothes. As a result, she had not even gone 2 streets when the young lady lifted her skirt and ran away. While running, she asked, "Where is the yamen?" The passers-by did not know the reason, but still showed the way. The young lady arrived in front of the yamen, beat the drum loudly, waking up the sleeping master, then made a report. She wanted to report the people from Jinyuka for illegally imprisoning her. As soon as she finished speaking, everyone in the hall was stunned. The old man asked her, "Who are you?" The young lady said, she came to Jinyuka to be a beauty queen. The old man suddenly nodded, his voice drawling, "Oh, a prostitute." The young lady shook her head, telling the story of how she was forced to sell her body, and what happened when she was locked up in the dungeon. She cried as she spoke, causing the old man and the 3 servants to be stunned, asking her if she knew what she was saying. She said she knew. The old man didn't say anything, called the servant next to her to whisper a few words. After waving his hand to tell him to leave, he continued to ask. Before 2 sentences had passed, the servant led the servant from the brothel to find the young lady and walked in. The old man's expression immediately changed, scolding them for not knowing how to manage their people well, and running to the court to cause trouble. So this time it was the young lady's turn to be stunned. She cried and questioned the old man in the main hall, "Isn't the courtroom a place to uphold justice? There are already people who have died in the Golden Jade Pavilion. Why do you still want to help evil people do bad things?" The old man waved his hand. "If you are a prostitute, you should stay put. Don't you know that running away is a great sin? If I want to uphold justice, I should also uphold justice for the Golden Jade Pavilion. If I didn't consider you a famous singing and dancing prostitute in the place I govern, how could I allow you to roar in the courtroom?" After saying that, the police officers and the still dumb henchmen dragged the young lady, who had forgotten to cry, out. As expected, when the young lady was tied back to the Golden Jade Pavilion, she was again met with fierce and cruel beatings from the madam. The madam was so angry that smoke was coming out of her 7 orifices. She ordered her men to whip the young lady viciously until her skin was torn open and blood was pouring out. She walked towards the madam with blood marks on her step by step. She said she didn't mean to run away. Keeping her here would definitely be useful. She wouldn't eat here. She would manage the books. As long as the madam kept her here. Pfft. The madam spat out a mouthful of saliva. "Can I rest assured that the money I spent on buying a coffin for the rest of my life would be in your hands, you whore? I'm even afraid that you'll steal all the money from the Golden Jade Pavilion. If you don't want to be a prostitute, then go be a whore and serve 20 men a day. I can still get back the money I spent on you." The madam was panting and squatting in front of the young lady, sneering sarcastically, "Not selling your body but still wanting to be a beauty queen. You're taking all the good things in the world by yourself?" When the young lady was thrown into the firewood room, she exhaled more than she inhaled. I was still hesitating whether I should go and see if she was okay, when the door was suddenly gently opened. A maid of about 14 or 15 years old walked in. The maid gently shook the young lady, waking her up, and gave her a sip of water to regain her strength. But the young lady not only did not thank her, but also threw away the bowl of water, scolding, "I won't drink your water, it's dirty." The young lady was stunned for a moment, lowered her head, tears as big as beans fell to the ground. She quietly picked up the broken pieces of the bowl, and softly said, I am the daughter of a decent family." Pfft. The young lady spat out bloody saliva on the ground. Why would a daughter of a decent family get involved with those people? The young lady suddenly raised her head to look at her face pale, her lips trembling slightly. The young lady sneered, "You have hands and feet, why don't you go out and work, earn money with your own strength? You're degrading yourself, using your beauty to serve others. Why don't you fight back?" The maid looked at her calmly for a moment, then suddenly let out a miserable scream. "If there was a choice, who would want to do this? If it weren't for my parents not being able to pay the taxes, being forced to starve to death on the streets, how could I have married a neighbor over 60 years old as a concubine? If it weren't for my husband being addicted to gambling, causing the house to fall apart, turning into a person neither human nor ghost, how could I have been sold here? If there was a choice, would I want to become so dirty?" The maid spoke as she backed away, crying loudly, and finally turned around and ran out. Before the young lady could react, she heard the sound of water coming from outside, followed by the panicked shouts of a group of people. Someone jumped into the lake. I appeared on the beam of the room, looked at the young lady who was still staring blankly at the wide-open door, and smiled. You also have 2 hands, but why did you want to come here to be a beauty queen? The young lady turned her head and glared at me. Those who use their beauty to serve others are despicable. I came here to rely on my skills to earn a living. Do you really think that people will come here just for a piece of music? So what? As long as I don't love anyone, they can only chase me, flatter me, but they can't have me. I burst out laughing. I flew down from the beam, and landed in front of her. Do you want to guess why they chased you, flattered you? Is it because of the music, or is it because I slowly hid my body, not finishing my last sentence? Someone came. They rushed in, grabbed the young lady's hair, and dragged her out, but this time I didn't follow them out. Instead, I jumped back onto the crossbar again, took out the fruit from the void, and gnawed at it while listening to the screams outside turn into pleas for mercy, then into pleading and flattering agreement. There are some things that you get tired of seeing too much of. It wasn't until they dragged the girl back again, throwing her against the wall, that I slowly emerged. She propped herself up, leaned against the wall, sobbing and panting. I walked in front of her, sat down, and shook the fruit in front of her. When she reached out to take it, I pulled back, smiled at her, and asked curiously, "Why haven't you thought of resisting yet?" Maybe I gave her a hint, or maybe she really wanted to resist. In the end, she came up with a terrifyingly surprising plan for me. She said she wanted to make explosives. All she needed was some potassium nitrate, sulfur, and charcoal, and some crude oil. Pfft. I couldn't hold it in. For a long time, I didn't even know if I was crazy or she was. She glanced at me and said that there were such examples in the books she had read. As long as she could escape, with the skills she learned in the modern world, she would definitely be able to survive in this world, extract penicillin, brew wine, make screws, drive shafts, rollers, and then use steam. Have you ever done it? She was stunned. I study the pipa, although I didn't major in it. I read it in a book. It's very simple. What book? Novel. Cough. I pretended to cough, avoiding her gaze. But she clung on tightly, begging me to help her, to give her some things or ingredients. Just a little bit. I raised my hand to interrupt her. I can't. Aren't you a god? How is this different from wanting a golden hand? I asked back. Even if I were a god, I wouldn't have the ability to interfere with the course of history. This isn't a golden hand. She refuted me. This is my own ability. My own strength. Oh. She avoided my gaze. I just want a little help from a god. A request from the madam. I flew up to the crossbar. I am a god, but not your god alone. I have no obligation to escort you, to be ordered around by you. Besides, in our contract, other than time travel, there are no conditions attached. I don't need to let a normal mortal suffer the backlash of heaven. Sir. Not being able to escape, isn't that your problem? I tilted my head, not smiling. Moreover, many people here can survive without the help of gods. Why can't a modern person like you? Why do you insist on having a golden hand? Still saying. Leaving me, you can't do anything, right? I asked her silently. The path you choose is your own. If it's the path you choose, then you have to walk it firmly. As a modern person, she brags all day about her thousands of years of evolution, surpassing her predecessors, and learning a lot. Why, in the end, could she not even escape from a small dark room? Why couldn't she change the mindset of a madam? Why couldn't she shake an era that was thousands of years behind? She has arms and legs. Why can't she rely on herself to create the raw materials for explosives? Can't rely on herself to escape from this place? Can't rely on her own strength to gain a foothold in this world? Can't rely on her own words to convince people? can't rely on her own knowledge to bring the world into the industrial age, and all day long she only wishes for the power of gods, making unreasonable demands for gods to come help her? Is it because she doesn't want to? I have a lot of patience, but the madam is not patient. Wait until the young lady's wound has healed a little, and her mouth has closed a little. She pushed the young lady to the wine and art stall. The young lady's beautiful face has attracted many people to come and see, and more people want to fondle her. But the madam refused. The reason is very simple: she wants to sell the young lady for a high price. So when a customer appeared with the highest price ever, the madam was very emotional. The young lady pretended to be spoiled, crying loudly, causing the whole room to become panicked. When the time was near, the madam finally breathed a sigh of relief. She called her "good girl" once, "good girl" twice, while skillfully coaxing her, then agreed to her request. The young lady took the cup of tea that the madam handed her and sipped it, struggling to swallow the tears that were holding back. Just as she was about to thank the madam, her legs suddenly wobbled, and she fell limply beside the table. The madam stood up, ordered the servant standing by her side, and told him to take the young lady carefully, warning her not to hurt her skin, otherwise the nobleman would be unhappy if he saw it. Seeing the young lady about to be taken away, the madam stood beside her, lifted her chin, and said with a cold smile, "When you enter a brothel, there are not so many things you want or don't want. Even if you really don't want to, you have to turn it into something you want." Then she let go of her hand, allowing them to leave. The young lady was taken into the room of the nobleman who had paid the highest price. The nobleman was already waiting, and as soon as the young lady was brought in limply, he stripped her naked without saying a word. While she was weakly resisting, the red curtains were already lowered. In my opinion, the young lady's dream of becoming a beauty queen seemed to have been half fulfilled with my help. But the young lady didn't seem to think so. After returning, she wrapped herself tightly in her blanket, motionless. I asked her, taking a step closer to the title of beauty queen, if she was happy. But she told me to ignore her anymore. She was dirty, despicable, and no longer clean. I sat in front of her room's window, holding a piece of grass in my mouth, laughing and expressing my confusion. "You humans, why do you want to use these reproductive matters to judge someone as dirty or despicable? Don't you feel it's unreasonable?" She didn't respond to me. So, I asked her, was the water that the girl gave her dirty? Was it despicable? What about the girls who resisted in the dungeon? Were they dirty? Were they despicable? And she looked at me for a moment, but in the end, she still didn't answer. After a long while, she asked me, "How was the girl that day?" "How was it?" I smiled. "Wouldn't it be better to go and see for yourself?" Without the young lady leaving, the madam couldn't wait any longer and took action against that girl. They dragged the girl, who was wearing only a thin shirt, out and threw her onto the open ground. The girl helplessly crawled up from the ground. Ever since the day she jumped out of the lake and was saved, she had been having a high fever, and now she was unconscious. The girls in the same room as her knelt down before the madam, who took pity on her, but the madam ordered her servants to chase the girls back. "What do they want to do?" the young lady asked me. I didn't answer, just motioned for her to continue watching. The servants pulled the girl aside, took off the bracelet she was wearing, pulled out the hairpin holding her bun, and even reached their hands into the hem of her clothes, looking for the necklace she was wearing, then yanked it out and examined it carefully. The maid reacted, weakly holding on to the earrings, refusing to let go, choking in a daze. Father, mother, the servants didn't care, snatching them as usual, carefully observing them for a long time. After confirming that they weren't worth much, they casually threw them aside. They touched the staggering maid back and forth several times, confirming that there were no valuables left before walking up to the madam, reporting to her that they were done. The madam glanced at them, waved her hand, and told them to handle it as before. The servants didn't react, but the little girls kneeling to the side had already started making a fuss. They cried and begged the madam to spare the maid, saying that she was only temporarily ill, and would be fine after being treated. Cured? The madam frowned, scolding the little girls. Where's the money? Who paid for the treatment? One little girl said, the maid was beautiful, receiving 7 or 8 guests every day. Wouldn't the money she earned be enough for her to see a doctor once? The madam scolded her. She said that she gave the maid good food and nice clothes. How could those not be money? But even if you count the food and drink, how much money could it cost? What's more, eating chaff, swallowing wild vegetables, and the hard-to-get meat that was given as a reward by the customers who had left over from eating, didn't all the money fall into the madam's hands? Now that the maid was seriously ill, the madam wouldn't even be willing to spend a few coins on medical treatment? The madam was furious. She said, no use is no use. Could it be that after curing her, she still had to take care of her for the rest of her life? Moreover, the girl like this now, isn't it the same as being dead? How can she be saved? It seemed like she heard what the madam said. The girl who had been unconscious at the side finally moved. She used all her strength to lift her hand, weakly saying like a mosquito's cry, save me, save me. The madam took a step back in disgust, waving her hand for the servants to come forward. One of them hesitated a bit, but was pushed forward by a few others. They wrapped the girl in a ragged reed mat, then threw her into the makeshift coffin made from scraps of wood next to her, then started nailing the lid shut. The girl who was originally in trouble suddenly came back to her senses at this moment. The girl's strength was probably exhausted. The sound of her fingernails scratching the coffin lid came from inside. Faintly one could still hear a very small cry for help, but not long after, the coffin was silent. It was unknown whether she was unconscious or dead. Finally, the coffin was carried away amidst the sobbing of the little girls. The girl asked a silly question, where will she be taken? I laughed, where else could it be? Of course it's the cemetery. 13. The girl didn't want to receive guests. The madam also didn't want to let her receive guests. However, it wasn't that the madam suddenly had a good heart. It was simply that the money given by someone who wanted to be intimate with such a beautiful girl was really too little. She was not satisfied. At that time, the madam waved her fan, sweetly saying, how come the beauty came? It was a fairy offering it. After all, a woman who sleeps with someone casually is considered despicable. She must make them spend a lot of money on her. Only then will a man be able to cherish her in the palm of his hand, love her in his heart, cherish her and love her. Wouldn't a good life come? A pearl that can be bought for just a penny on the sidewalk and an ankle bought for millions in a high-rise building are not the same in the end. We women and those things for sale, aren't we all the same? What's more, 1 or 2 of us aren't ankles. The sentence was interrupted. The errand boy from behind hurriedly leaned close to the madam's ear and said something. The madam was extremely frightened, immediately standing up and walking to the back. The young lady didn't know what had happened, so she followed the group of prostitutes. The person who happened this time seemed to be a somewhat famous flower girl in the Golden Jade Pavilion. When everyone rushed over, she was holding a thin veil to cover the faint red marks on her body. The pure white robe was stained with blood that was difficult to clean. The room was filled with a faint fishy smell. An old man who was inspecting the girl's back was immediately startled until his voice was hoarse. They pointed at the flower girl and shouted in fear, rapeseed, rapeseed. The young lady didn't understand, so she asked the person next to her. The person next to her had a hard time speaking, and after a long while, she finally said, this is an illness, a disease punished by heaven. It is retribution for people like you. Before she could finish speaking, the madam raised her hand and slapped her. The madam said, fuck, there is no illness, this is something that shouldn't grow on the body. Then she ordered someone to hold the young lady down, found a soldering iron, and ignored the young lady's pitiful pleas, and pressed the hot soldering iron into the foreign object on the young lady. Screams and a strange smell immediately filled the room. Some timid people were so scared that their legs went weak, hiding against the wall, trembling. The rest hugged each other, leaning close to each other, sobbing. Only when the madam finished treating the young lady and gasped for breath did everyone reluctantly breathe a sigh of relief. Madam felt compassion and agreed to let the flower girl eat some porridge, 3 meals a day, and if she got better, she could continue to receive guests. Don't pretend to be dead. If she continued to pretend to be dead, she wouldn't have any food to eat. Madam said that her illness had been cured, but no one believed her. A few days passed, and the stench in the flower girl's room could no longer be concealed. She sat in a puddle of pus, painfully begging Madam to treat her. She said, "Mama, I'm only 19 years old, and my husband imprisoned me at Jinjuku since I was 10. How many guests have I had in the past 4 years? Can't I get a chance to see a doctor?" Madam covered her nose and backed away, feeling extremely disgusted, but in the end, she agreed to the flower girl's request. The doctor arrived very quickly. He told Madam that the flower girl's body had too little yin energy and too much yang energy, which led to the turbid white qi and heat toxins invading. Even if she was cured, she wouldn't be able to have sex easily anymore. The madam immediately understood, and began to pack her things, wanting the flower girl to return to her home. She threw the flower girl all the tattered things, and all the valuable things were robbed as usual. The flower girl begged her to leave some things for her. After all, she had sold them to the madam for 5 years, and she couldn't not give her even a little bit of anything. Moreover, if she returned empty-handed, her husband would definitely beat her to death. But the madam said, hadn't she been the one who raised her for the past 5 years? The flower girl ate her food, drank her water, wore gold and silver, all of which were given to her by her. The servants and maids were also hired by her. As for the carriages and sedan chairs that went out, did she ask the flower girl to pay a single penny? She was so unreasonable. Could it be that all of these things were blown by the northwest wind? Moreover, how many pennies could the flower girl sell for each time she went out? Now she is sick all over, not to mention dirtying her Jinyu pavilion. If today's matter were to spread out, how many literati would dare to come to Jinyu pavilion? I am already lucky that she is not being forced to pay. Moreover, when her husband brought her to Jinyu pavilion to pawn, he said it would be 10 years, but 10 years has not yet come. She said that the amount of money was not enough for the madam to buy her back then. Now the madam does not even bother to pay for her body and let her go back home. Not being grateful is enough, but still wants to ask for money. How much did the beautiful time of the past 5 years cost? The madam does not know who to ask for compensation. After saying that, she ordered someone to roll up some rags, even a few sets of undergarments of the flower girl, stuff them into her hands, then take a stick and chase people out. Finally, the young lady couldn't take it anymore. She knelt before me, begging me to take her away from this place. She said she wanted to go home. She wouldn't be a beauty queen anymore. As long as I could take her away, she would be willing to give me as much incense as she could. However, this was originally different from the terms of the contract. If I intervened to take her away, the one who would suffer the most disaster would definitely be me. This was something that no amount of incense could compensate for. So the young lady got angry. She asked me why I wanted to bring her to this era. I appeared on the windowsill, leisurely lifted my foot and asked her, had she forgotten that just 10 light years away from the era she was living in a certain city in the south, there were still hidden prostitution streets? It was common for friends and relatives to deceive and force upright people into prostitution. The world is like this. How can you say that I chose this era? Then why didn't you stop me back then? The lady asked me. I am a god, not your parents. Why should I stop you? I was very curious about the lady's logical thinking. Isn't my existence to fulfill the wishes of humanity? But you are a god. Aren't you supposed to save all living beings? Save the common people? Really? I shook my leg, but you didn't tell me these things. You only told the new gods that we must use 3 lives, 3 kulpas, 10 lives, 10 kulpas to love intensely, to shake the 3 worlds. If love fails, then one must destroy heaven and earth, otherwise how can one talk about deep feelings? Because only then can one receive your admiration and envy, and that is the source of our magical power. I looked at the girl who was looking at me angrily, and said so. But tears quickly welled up in her eyes, and she asked me, if I told you now, you should go save those people, and also save me, would you do it? No. I immediately dismissed it. I already have an easy way to achieve everything, so why do I have to go through the difficult and unpopular way you are talking about now? After all, you are just the opinion of a few, not representing the majority, just like your stories and books. The market is what decides everything, right? When the market says that gods with deep feelings are more likely to receive incense, then why do we have to go through all this trouble to save you, only to end up with a mixed reputation? Only the foolish gods of the past would do such a thing. Yet everyone killed them with their own hands. The young lady wanted to be a beauty queen, but the young lady didn't want to sell her body. But once she entered the golden jade pavilion, it was no longer up to her to decide. At first, the madam would beat her, but later she stopped beating her, and put drugs straight away. In the tea, in the wine, on the handkerchief, there were only places the young lady couldn't think of, but there was no place she couldn't beat her. When the young lady's defenses were really too tight, the madam would immediately order her servants to hit her on the head with a stick, and carry the limp young lady to the guest room. How could anyone who came to the golden jade pavilion be someone who cherished flowers and jade? Everyone who came to this place wanted to love and caress her, and have sex with her, right? What's more, everyone knew that the young lady was the most beautiful person in the golden jade pavilion. Even if she was unconscious, sleeping soundly, and not alluring enough, as long as she could spend a night of soul-stirring, tasting the freshness, that was also an extremely noteworthy matter. No one would refuse. Every time the young lady opened her empty eyes, waking up naked on the bed, the light in her eyes also dimmed a little. It was rare that she seemed to be choking, as if she was telling me, she came to be a beauty queen. The book said how good the life of a beauty queen was. Why was it her turn to be so unfortunate? I was bored and didn't bother to answer her. On the contrary, the madam looked at the young lady who was becoming more and more obedient, and waved her fan and laughed smugly. She said, she had met many despicable and cunning people like her. If she didn't listen, she would beat her. In the golden jade pavilion, there were no sweet words to coax her. Whoever wanted to be a heroic virgin, then do it. What use was there in persuading her with words? Other than being stubborn, there was only stubbornness. Seeing many men, even a young lady with chastity would be promiscuous. If she ran away, she would be starved. If she resisted, she would be beaten. If she refused to receive guests, she would be given drugs. If she didn't even dare to give up drugs, what ability did she have to take control of this vast golden jade pavilion? If you can't even cultivate the ability to make men feel like they're immortal, then what use is there to be a beauty queen? Do you really think that all men are like Lu Xiaohui, that women can sit in her arms without being disturbed, and that just seeing a beautiful face is enough to control their desires? Willingly giving up everything just to look at a beautiful face? Even ghosts wouldn't believe it. If it's really like that, why has there only been one Lu Xiaohui in thousands of years? The young lady has probably accepted her fate. Her resistance from the early days has turned into a ruckus, like heaven and earth turning upside down, turning into smashing glasses and throwing bowls, until her resistance has lessened by half, and she's reluctant. As her resistance gradually lessens, the madam's smile becomes happier, and the young lady's reputation spreads further and further, because of her beautiful face. Of course, there was also the pipa skill. In short, the young lady went from being an unknown prostitute to a famous courtesan, and from a famous courtesan to being the top of the Jin Yugu. When someone mentioned the young lady, most of them talked about her soul-stirring charm. This made more and more people fall in love with the young lady, throwing money away like trash just to ask for one night. There were so many people, the young lady couldn't keep up. So she begged the madam if she could take a break. Beyond expectations, the madam agreed this time. However, it wasn't because the madam had good intentions, it was simply because the young lady's reputation was now too famous. There were really too many people who wanted to meet her. After many rounds of fighting, a bidding war broke out. The highest bidder would get in. The madam had her hands full. Of course she was happy to let the young lady act like she wanted to refuse but couldn't bear to. This illustrious reputation also made her very popular with officials and scholars, and her lack of literary knowledge became a secondary concern. Every time she went out, her name would definitely be on the invitations. When they went out together, the princes and princes would often joke, saying that they had heard of her beauty and talent, but they just didn't know what talent meant. Everyone understood what she meant, and then burst out laughing.